I've got a couple of slides on the revenue requirements that will form the rates, and then just touch on a couple of recommendations as to where we go forward. This is the preliminary, this is the first draft of the budget that council will get a chance to see, and I'm looking for dialogue and discussion, any kind of feedback that will help me finalize and formulate what the plan will be going forward, both for all of our ratepayers, but also the BC Utilities Commission, that we have to file our 24 rates application by the end of October. So the regulatory update. Our 2023 revenue requirements application is still, as of today, unapproved. We finished the final requirements in September. They target 90 days, so we may not have approved rates for 2023 prior to submitting our 2024 rate application, which is a challenge, and I will probably refer to that several times as we go through today. Similarly, our reconsideration and variance of our cost of service analysis. The COSA was completed as a process, but we've filed a reconsideration and variance of some of the determinations that they made in their July 29th, 2022. And we have not heard back from the BC Utilities Commission on the results of that. So moving forward, we're kind of going with a lot of assumptions as to how that's going to formulate our 2024 rates. Just a few other items that we've been working on. Our generic cost of capital. That's a province-wide proceeding that the Utilities Commission is using to set a benchmark. They've used FortisBC as the benchmark utility, and they have ruled on their phase one. And the reason it's relevant to us here is that it does approve an increase to FortisBC's 2023 rates, retroactive to the 1st of January 2023. So it's a retroactive rate increase. We don't know exactly what that is yet or what it looks like. I've been in contact with FortisBC Regulatory, and what they're saying right now is they're working on something, and they don't know exactly what that looks like, but for sure it's not going to change our rates for 2023. It might impact the rates for 2024 that they have published, but that's still to be determined. They're working on finalizing all that, and we'll make a proposal within the first 2 weeks of October, so we should know before we file a rates application with the Utilities Commission how they want to do that and be able to incorporate that.
Scott, since our definitely our rate of return is based on Fortis's rate of return, and likely possibly our debt rate is impacted, plus our debt to equity, which is more out of the COSA. So anyway, we I think all of those might also impact our rates as well. If Fortis is, because that's the big thing, is they're looking at their return on capital increasing. I can't remember by how much, but are we 0.5 or 0.75 greater than theirs in the COSA, right?
Yes, that's correct. And just to be clear on that, I will touch on it, but phase two is when they look at all of the other utilities that are impacted, that use that benchmark rate, and how they're going to be impacted by that. So that is something that will be coming up in 2024 that we'll be working on. And they have indicated that those utilities that are impacted by any changes there would be retroactive to January 1st, 2024. So we don't get the benefit of that, so it will not change our 2024 rate application, but it will impact our 2025 rate application, and it'll be retroactive. I know. There's a lot going on with the Utilities Commission right now, and that's what I wanted to just touch base on a few of these things, because I will talk about them as we talk about budget impacts and that. The next one, the BC Municipal Utilities Inquiry, it's completed and it's gone to the legislature. There's no impacts to Nelson Hydro, but it is something that we are following because it does impact municipal corporations. And one of the things that we've talked about as options within Nelson Hydro is making it a municipal corporation as opposed to just a department of the utility. Not that we're moving forward on that, but it's something that has been discussed here at council before. And that's something that will potentially impact, that discussion.
I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's some sort of crux there around the current legislation and how it applies currently with the wording that's there for local corporations, which actually for us is just a barrier to go down that route, or any other municipality to go down that route.
It's a fairly complex issue that has been, they took 2.5, 3 years where they were looking at it, and they got input from municipalities. Most of the municipalities that have been engaged in it actively have been the ones that have municipal corporations, especially ones that are district heating or other sort of energy related corporations that the Utilities Commission was trying to decide if they should be regulating them. And most of the municipalities were saying, no, they don't, they should not be regulating within municipal boundaries. So that has now gone to the legislature based on their findings and recommendations, which essentially was that the BCUC should regulate municipal energy-related municipal corporations within municipal boundaries, but that there would be an exemption, sort of a lightened regulatory regime where you could just report annually as opposed to a full inquiry on rates. But again, not relevant to Nelson Hydro or City of Nelson yet.
I think the other piece of that is a lot of those are sort of private public entities. So there's a private ownership of those heat utilities, etc. So that's another factor that, I think complicates those ones from our situation.
Councillor Page.
That refreshes the conversation that we had at UBCM, which was that as it exists now, should you partake upon being a local government corporation, you would, as the legislation is currently written, you would bring the BCUC oversight into your corporation as if you were any other private corporation, which is obviously going to be a barrier because the exemption as a municipal operations is certainly beneficial to being able to run your utility inside your boundary and not have the regulatory framework imposing itself on you. So cleaning that language up and understanding that, and as you say, figuring out a lightened framework is still the work that they're obviously chasing down.
There's still a work in progress,
Okay.
and it is
Thanks.
gone to the legislature with the BCUC's recommendations on that. Fortis BC 2023 annual review of rates, so that is completed and approved. So Fortis was approved for an interim rate of 3.98%, and then it was made interim until the results of the generic cost of capital phase 1 was complete. So now that's what Fortis is currently working on to finalize their 2023 rates. And then just something that came up recently is the BCUC has opened up a regulatory efficiency initiative. So they're asking for input on how they can become more efficient, and Nelson Hydro and City of Nelson has said we would actively participate in that process.
Okay.
In the past year, there was a number of directives that came from the BC Utilities Commission that impact our budget. So the Participant Assistance Cost Awards, that's for interveners who engage in the proceedings that we've been involved in. They did approve that we had to pay the $85,000 to two interveners, a total of $85,000 to two separate interveners who participated in our cost of service analysis proceeding. But they did also allow us to establish a deferral account or apply for a deferral account that would allow us to move that into future years as opposed to taking the hit in 2023, which we'd already set the budget and had not budgeted for that cost.
So, sorry,
Yeah, sure.
through the chair. Was this the ones the BCUC had added to that cost of service analysis, or which interveners?
Yeah, the two interveners, the Residential Consumer
Yeah.
Intervenor Association, so that's the body that was created by the BCUC in order to represent residential customers. And then the other one is the BC Old Age Pensioners Association.
Which was invited in?
They just asked to be interveners as part of it, and they have been in the past.
Okay.
Yeah. They represent substantially the same constituency, but slight focus differences. But
Okay.
again, part of our regulatory efficiency discussions, we hope. The other thing that came down this year was they directed all utilities in BC to develop a cybersecurity program following their adopted cybersecurity framework. So we initiated that in 2023. It's a 2-year pilot. They also indicated that a deferral account could be applied for costs that were not budgeted in 2023, which we will do in our application.
Yep. Jesse?
Thank you. Through the chair. Heard a little bit about this down at UBCM in terms, not this, but about cybersecurity and the challenges for municipalities. Wondering, could we get locked out? Could we get hijacked and locked out of our system for Nelson Hydro? Or do you feel like we have some protections around that? Because I did hear that has happened to some municipalities or sections of municipalities.
Yeah, it's a threat and it's a risk, one that I've been talking about since we've been here and working with the IT department. One of the things that we did this year as a direct result of the BCUC, I mean, the city has been looking at cybersecurity independently, but the BCUC specifically asked us to look at it from a perspective of their framework, which is following the NIST protocols, which National, Internet something security.
Institute of Science and Technology.
Maybe that's it, yeah. So the NIST protocol, I'm not even sure what, but there's a specific set of procedures to be engaged on. We did do a gap analysis, and yes, we are at risk. And in some areas, we're at high risk to internet security or to cybersecurity. And part of the framework is we're putting together a plan which will have budget impacts for the next 2 years as we implement that framework.
Thank you.
Councillor Page?
I anticipate you might already be aware of this, but the Ministry of Citizens Services is on a cybersecurity kick right now and partnering with City of Kamloops to establish best practices as well as looking for places to provide consulting and share resources and invest in local governments having strong security postures. And so I think those resources are available to partner with Ministry of Citizen Services. And I have some contacts that I could give to you for that stuff to be looked at because they want to have a deeper understanding of what it's really going to do to get local governments into a strong security posture across the province.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and you'll hear this in the larger budget discussions, but, as Scott alluded to, we have looked at this from the citywide perspective as well, so there's some fairly substantial cost related to getting where we need to get to. I think right now, we don't have a lot of our systems controlled by, devices that flow through digitally, so we're not at risk that someone's gonna turn the generators off or on, or those type of things, but.
It's mostly hijacked information and then you gotta
Right,
pay, right?
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, our actual control systems are not a significant risk. It's more sort of our general IT systems and our ability to do regular business. Sure. So, and policies, procedures, protocols, things like that, there's some low-hanging fruit that we can put in place, which we have plans to do in the next couple of years.
Thank you.
So the BCUC's also been showing some interest in safety. There's been some incidents with BC Hydro that I think caught their attention, and they've been requesting information. I'm expecting there might be more to come in 2024 around safety matters, but so far they've just asked us to report our safety results, which have been quite good over the past 10 years. So That's just something we're doing. They've also been requesting information on greenhouse gas reporting. So, I mean, we're doing most of that already. It's just more things for us to do on an already full plate.
Scott, excuse me.
Yeah.
On that, on just quick on the greenhouse gas reporting, are we looking at just operational carbon from just running or does it include capital and potentially like embodied carbon from new projects?
Yeah, operational carbon is the only ask they've had so far. In fact, the only ask they've really had was, who are you already reporting to, and what are you reporting to them? I think they're trying to develop a policy is to determine, like, so that not to burden utilities with additional reporting, that if we're already reporting to Canada or, you know, the province on certain things, then they may not ask us to report or to, you know, copy them or something like that. I don't know exactly where they're going with it, but they're asking questions about what our reporting currently is, so that they could formulate a policy themselves.
Thank you, Mayor. You are reporting to us because of Nelson Next, right?
Yes.
We have to.
Yeah,
have
it's
that
the
data.
climate and energy team that is doing the reporting and supporting me in this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we have to report to the province through, forget what the acronym is these days. Pardon? LGCAP, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so upcoming proceedings, so just to give you a heads up of what we were looking at for our budget in 2024, we talked, so, you know, big part of today is to establish the budget to work towards our 2024 regular revenue requirements application, which is due the end of October to the Commission. Phase 2 of the generic cost of capital will take some of our time. They have specifically directed Nelson Hydro to actively participate in this because we have been so adamant about being unique as a municipal utility that operates outside of its boundaries and dually regulated and all those kinds of things. So they would like to hear from us specifically in that proceeding. There's been no timetable set yet, but I'm expecting early in the new year we'll start to see some more activity around that. Then the efficiency initiative that we talked about, I think our first deadline is the 16th of October to submit our initial responses to some questions that they asked us about how they could improve their services. Fortis BC has applied for a rate for 2024. It's part of their annual review of rates, so they have a multi-year rate plan, so this is year 3, I think, of their 4-year plan. And they've asked for a 4.83% rate increase for 2024. And as I said, there may be changes to that depending on how they propose to the BCUC to deal with the retroactive payment for 2023 and, you know, the increased ROE for 2024 and beyond. And then the last one, I know I've been promising this for years now, the Hydro Services bylaw update. You know, the Utilities Commission has asked us to hold off on this until we finish all of our rate, you know, the significant rate applications. And from a capacity perspective internally, it's just not been something we've been able to really push forward while we've been still dealing with all these other rate applications. So I have penciled it in for spring of 2024. I will come to council first with the amendments. There may be some impact to the things that we've recommended so far, or that we've put in the updates so far, that come out of the decisions from the reconsideration variance or the various other proceedings that we're involved in. So I've been holding back on bringing it to council just so that once we've finalized it, it goes to council, and then we'll take it to the Utilities Commission. I wanted to raise some awareness about other regulatory bodies. I talk a lot about the BC Utilities Commission, and when we talk about regulatory, that's usually who I'm talking about, but there has been some increased activity with other bodies. So the Technical Safety BC, we've been in discussion with them for a number of years. In February of 2023, they directed us or made a decision that they need to be engaged in our activities within the municipal boundaries. We were going on the exemption that's provided to utilities that we don't have to report to Technical Safety BC for utility operations. But they've determined that they need to have some kind of oversight over internal utilities, utility operations within the municipal boundaries, which would be the same program as what we have for the rest of the utility.
Yes, Councilor Ward.
Thank you. So I see the technical safety CBC and the dam safety. So the technical safety, are they looking at, because we had to sort of reclassify our reservoir as a dam? So that would be through them?
No, so this is different. So this is Technical Safety BC. It's the electrical power distribution branch.
Okay,
It's,
so is the next
not-
one, the dam safety, is that like having to do with?
So far, Technical Safety BC has not been looking at us from a dam safety perspective. It's the Ministry of Forests, who are water management branch, that the dam safety officer out of Victoria. We had not, in the history of Nelson Hydro, 100 and whatever years since the dam was built between, or the horseshoe between Fortis and Nelson Hydro, had never been actually regulated. They kind of forgot about us. Because the forebay that retains all the water is essentially sort of part of the building structure and like that. So it was kind of an oversight that they picked up on about a year and a half ago. They ordered a dam safety review, which we have completed. And there's a number of projects and activities that we are going to be required to do over the next 10 years to, rectify a number of deficiencies that were identified in that dam safety review, and those are part of the budget, primarily the capital budget, a little bit of O&M in terms of, additional procedures and processes that we need to put in place.
So, this whole dam issue, which is a big issue because it affects, we've had discussions for years in the
Which
RD and the,
Are you talking about the dam?
well, just dams in general, just
general,
because
okay.
dams, because it's like a big red flag for the government, and then it's a big green flag for all the money that all the people that are gonna get the jobs that come in to look at it are gonna
So
make.
that stuff got washed away.
I'm curious just to know, and it's one of those things that when you look at the catastrophic disaster in Libya, if in the worst case scenario, our dam was to fail, what is the downstream impact? Or are we just are we holding back a lot of water, or is everybody else actually holding back the water?
We are not holding back a lot of water, but we are holding back some. So part of the dam safety review and part of we've now, as a result of that, they identified that we needed to include an inundation map in our dam emergency
Okay.
plan, which we had in place. So that now includes the inundation map. We also have a list of, I think it's 30 properties that would potentially be impacted by a breach of our dam, which, in the most catastrophic sense, essentially you would evaporate the entire powerhouse of where the generators are, and everything would go. That's the maximum inundation flood at top of Freshet. So there's 30 properties that could potentially be impacted by that, and our dam emergency plan now includes procedures for us to notify those people, and we have letters going out to them and things like that. So that's sort of the type of thing that has resulted from this dam safety review, is that we hadn't really considered it because we are such a small amount, but it does raise the level in a catastrophic failure would potentially impact not just property but buildings as well. There's some
Right.
buildings in that.
Mayor?
Yes.
So we had the atmospheric rivers in 2021, which did massive damage across BC here.
Yeah.
But obviously it was a stress test on our system and we passed. So that's a good indicator that it can handle like extreme levels, because that was about as extreme as it gets, right?
Yeah, we were able to actually generate at full capacity. So, and for us, it was that event was actually a very positive
Right.
impact. Yeah, it's theoretically been a stress test, but we still need to go through all the paperwork and have all the engineering backing up our assumptions that we don't need to do any major upgrades, or we do need to do major upgrades. Okay, last couple of items. I've spoken to council before about Engineers and Geoscientists BC. Their permit to practice, we have in place. They indicated about a month ago that they are conducting an audit, so we have provided them with all the information to do that audit. We're expecting sometime, I don't know what their time frame is, but sometime in the next month or so, that we will be doing a virtual audit with them over our engineering processes. And this is citywide. It's not just Nelson Hydro, but Public Works as well. And WorkSafe BC. So this is a general sort of compliance that we need to be always following. And one of the things that we focused on in 2023 has been making sure that we are compliant to WorkSafe BC, and the electrical safety plan was one area that really needed some attention. So we've now put all that in place. So there's a lot of activity and budget impacts to making sure that we are meeting all of our regulatory compliance for all of these items. So. Okay, so that's the regulatory. I'm going to go through just some highlights of our 2023 operations. Just as an overall, from an operations perspective, we've had good reliability this year. I just talked about the safety. We did a number of different safety audits through the year, and we've been following up on those. The dam safety review was completed in 2023. We did add our new power line technician, which has been very successful. We've been able to do a lot more small capital projects, especially the pole replacements. The crew's replaced over 40 poles, I think, so far this year, that we would otherwise have been contracting out to outside parties. So the addition of the power line technician has been successful. And then I can't say enough about our power systems engineer, Kevin Donetto. Was a great addition to the team. He has been just turning rocks over left, right, and center. Unfortunately, that means that he's identifying a lot of things that we need to fix and work on, but it's been really great to have him looking at load balancing our systems model and a lot of the details, working closely with the line crews to rectify issues and work at the plant as well. So that's been a good addition. And then this year we were also able to sign a 4-year collective agreement with the IBEW, which is a big thing because it now allows everybody to just focus on getting the work done, and nobody's distracted about having to deal with negotiations. That's allowing us to move forward with confidence, especially from a budget perspective. We now know exactly what we've got for the next 4 years. On the capital side, Mill Street, that's been sort of the big focus this year. It's the biggest capital spend, biggest amount of resources that we've expended to it. The work is started. Martech is the general contractor on that, and we've divided the area in half, so they now have full control of the half, and they're going to develop half of the substation over the next 6 months, and then we'll switch over to the new system and then develop the other half. So we've got a phased approach. We're expecting Mill Street to be completed in September 2024.
Why was it? Can you point that out in the photo you have there?
The photo I have there is of the, so this is, the existing station has the two things you see there are the two transformers. Well, the very first thing is a voltage regulator, but in the back is the two transformers. The very first one is the one that failed, that's T41. But what we're doing is we're operating off of T42, which is behind that. And then to the right of that photo is where we've divided the station in half. We used to have the equipment that predated this equipment in the other half. And so it's now all been cleared, and now we're removing the foundations, and then we'll start pouring the foundations for the new transformer. So the new regulations, we can't squeeze things into a space the same size anymore. We have to have proper oil containment. We have to have engineered foundations. There's a lot of things that this new substation, to meet current code, looks a lot different than the existing one. So there'll only be two larger transformers on either side of the station. Our G3 and G4 exciter, it's not that exciting to look at, but it's some cabinets in the plant that make sure that G3 and G4 operate properly. And that work those are being built off-site, and they're expected to arrive in November. So G3 will be installed in November, G4 in November, December, and then G4 will probably finish up in January, so it'll be done early this year.
Thanks. G5, you did a fair amount of retrofit already on it, right?
Yes.
So is that kind of like taken care of for a while?
Yeah, I guess I should have highlighted that. So the G5 turbine was completely overhauled. We finished that in early 2023, and it has been running fantastically. It's now good for 25 years.
Great.
We do have some money in the budget for some work on the generator that we have scheduled for 2024.
And are G3 and G4 going to need overhauls also?
We do have some work scheduled for G2 and G4 in 2024 budget. G3, nothing urgent happening there right now. But we don't have any major overhauls in the next 5 years for either of those units, but we do have some repairs that we do need to make.
And do you feel like that you're confident that G2, 3, 4, and 5, like with Frechette, like say if we get a huge Frechette, we're good to go on those machines?
Yeah, they require ongoing maintenance. So prior to Frechette, we always take each of the units down and make sure that everything is in as good a shape as it can be, and we'll run through the Frechette. So yeah, I'm very confident in the units here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's another of the succession planning pieces in place with Kevin retiring here probably soon, and a new millwright was hired. And
Yeah, our new millwright, Andrew, has been fantastic. Very eager and keen. He's pulling everything out of Kevin's brain and putting it straight into our new computerized maintenance management system, which is the last bullet there, the asset management. So we have that, and we have all of our equipment now in the system, and Andrew is populating all of our preventative and predictive maintenance tasks annually into that, so that it's not just reliant on handwritten notes or Kevin's internal clock that says, oh, it's time for us to go check on this. So, or it sounds a little bit funny. We should go look at that. So it's that kind of experience is hard to replace, but we're doing our best to try and make sure we've got that with Kevin.
Great.
The Geographic Information System, GIS, we've been working on that. It's taken quite a bit of resources, especially from our design team, but it's going well. And we're hoping by the end of this year we'll be close to migrating a lot of our, what we are now maintaining as our, record documents on AutoCAD will now be in the GIS system. So that's been progressing well. I've got advanced metering infrastructure here because I just want to point out that we did not do any work on this year. We had plans when I brought it to council last year that we were going to do some more scoping. We set that aside when we saw the Mill Street upgrade going over budget or over planned. So we redirected all that capital. And I'm not planning on doing anything in 2024 either. We just don't have the resources, and I don't think we can afford the capital. As much as I really want to see see that move forward, because it's got so many downstream benefits, it's just too much for us as a utility at this time. So we're just taking that a little bit more cautiously and focusing on the major capital work that we have to do in order to keep the lights on and maintain the existing system.
And I think New West they're implementing, are they? Are they
New
already?
West is moving forward with theirs, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing we'll be exploring is there a partnership amongst local government utilities, because one of the big costs is the front end software costs. It's not the sort of the meters in the field. And it makes it really difficult for us to be able to make that work financially if you have to be this standalone utility to fund that significant upfront cost of the the software system itself, and, can we partner with a New West or other municipal utilities to, have one, create an entity that houses that software and does all that, meter reading, et cetera, for sort of a bunch of us as opposed to one-offs.
Is there not a reason to try working with BC Hydro or Fortis on that? It's because they've already got their.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever had discussions.
Yeah, we've had some discussions with Fortis. Privacy issues become a bit, something we have to work through, but we just haven't had the resources to be able to dedicate to have those conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we share some of the costs with Fortis or other municipal utilities, it's still a big bill, and it's still quite a resource drain for us to be able to implement a system like that. All of the meters, all of the collectors, everything that's on the ground still requires implementation. So it's still pricey. And if you remember, we had an estimate of $9 million for the whole package. So we could reduce that to 6 maybe. With some efficiencies, but it's still a big effort and
Follow up to Councillor Lockberg and then Councillor Woodward.
So, Scott, just a question about working with BC Hydro on this. Part of their future, their services plan or their BC Hydro plan is that there's market solutions to advanced demand or unexpected demand, which, I mean, we would count as one of their market solutions there. So it seems to me there's an opportunity to work with them as building up the market. In other words, ideally not going out of jurisdiction to the U.S., or if we can sort of create a richer ecosystem. I know there's only really three players, ultimately us, Fortis, us being tiny, but still I think there would be some incentive for BC Hydro, or some pressure could be put on BC Hydro to really support us in setting this up.
challenging for us to put pressure on BC Hydro. They're significantly bigger. I hear that. I will do that. We haven't had any meaningful conversations with BC Hydro. The project manager, Christine, if you remember her, that we'd hired, she hasn't been active this year for it, but she's ex-BC Hydro and has lots of contacts, and so I know she used those when we were putting together, the initial feasibility study in terms of, overall costs and cost per unit and things like that. So we have contacts there, and we'll continue to pursue those when we pick this up again.
Okay, well, I just would say that, I mean, you look to us to support some of that initiative, because I know that, we've got contacts, but also there's some political pressure here, because BC Hydro in this moment is feeling some pressure that they're promising that all the electricity we'll ever need for full electrification is there, and yet behind the scenes are not so confident. And so leaning into that.
About 80% short.
Short. Councillor Woodward.
I was just wondering with the advanced metering infrastructure piece, would that be something that we'd get a grant to complete and actually hire somebody that's, not, so that you're not relying on the staff you have now, but actually come and bring somebody in for a year or two or whatever?
Yeah, and that's something that we're keeping an eye out for, and buying a little bit of time to secure and identify those opportunities is what I'm hoping that we can use. But rather than pushing forward with it as aggressively as we had originally hoped, taking a little bit more time to look for opportunities where we can leverage some efficiencies and opportunities, grant opportunities, etc.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other, just adding to that, the other thing that we've seen in the rate application is a significant pushback from the interveners and questioning the value of this. So there's a lot of pushback, and it would require a large regulatory process to go through, and all those, with our uncertainty on the whole regulatory piece until we get that settled down, and I think look at how we structure this utility. Doesn't make sense that rural side is a municipal corp, and the the city side stays as a department or whatever those models are. And there's a lot of regulatory things we need to get in place before we embark on something like this has not a lot of uptake and a significant amount of pushback. If you read the IRs and the reply arguments from the interveners are challenging every capital penny we spend and asking for large regulatory processes for any large capital expenditures.
Councillor Page.
When we look to our strategic plan inside of this, on the hydro side, and how it ties back to the broader strategies of BC Hydro and how those tie back to Clean BC, I think when you look at the 911 funding pockets that came down to bring everything up to the same level, there's that additional regulatory burden coming from the feds there that gives clarity, but I think there's a conversation to be had there for ourselves, for New Westminster, about how we do as a province want to be able to have an even delivery of advanced metering infrastructure so that those opportunities for demand side management can be achieved as a province as part of those larger goals. That makes sense to provide some sort of funding pocket through UBCM to all utilities that might be trying to take on this new technology and get on the other side. I think there is a clear ask you can make there.
Yeah, and there's other utilities as well. It's not just electricity, so water and
Exactly.
and gas. Lots of opportunities there. So
Resource conservation.
yeah. So that's something that we haven't been working on. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just have one question.
Yep.
I mean, I've always been very much that we should move ahead with the advanced metering. But when I keep seeing these increasing costs, and so my question comes that, what is the return on investment? And now before every other councillor in the room says, I know what the return on investment is. Are we any less green? We are talking about hydro utility. I just sort of need to clearly get in my head what the ultimate advantage of doing this is, because I know that there will be pushback from the rural our rural people that use our service based on this is just gleaning more personal information from me that I'm not too sure that you need. And like I say, I mean, we're not going to be any less green. We're suddenly not spilling Kool-Aid over the dam. I mean, it's still water, and it's still making us look pretty good. So I would like to, when we have another update or when you start contemplating this again, or if anything crosses the plate that there is funding, or as Councillor Page says, is it like a cross-provincial thing that comes through, like our 911 funding, then obviously you need to look at it. So my last question really is, who does it? Because I know when you've mentioned this before, it's like we're kind of a little bit late to the party on AMI. Who doesn't have this? Like, is it 80% of the province doesn't have AMI, or is it 10% of the province that doesn't have AMI, and we happen to just be in that 10%?
Yeah, a 2021 survey indicated that 90% of all electricity customers in Canada have advanced metering. So we're in that
Canada.
in Canada.
But the population is concentrated not here.
Correct. Yeah. So it's small municipal utilities that have not been able to leverage that economies of scale to be able to implement it. In BC we're pretty unique. There's only 5 of us small municipal utilities, none of which have AMI. So that makes a portion of it. But there's small utilities in Ontario as well that haven't been able to make that switch, and that's like Ontario had over 300 small utilities about 15 years ago, and I think they're down to less than 180 now. So that's because it's tough to make a go of it from a small utility, and so in order to be able to do these advances, you need to have some scale behind it. So that's the challenge that we're facing right now, and that's why I feel like right now we just need to take a little bit of a step back. We would really like it. It would be great to be as technologically advanced as the big players right now, but I'm hoping it gives us time to see some of the advantages of the newer systems that are coming out, because there's we would be going straight to like AMI 2.0, which is what a lot of the utilities are now migrating to, which have more advanced demand side management capabilities to be able to give all these features that we're talking about and are being piloted in places like Kelowna and other communities are able to do that because they have advanced metering. So by the time we get to it, I'm hoping that some of these technologies will all be mature, the path will be clear, we'll be able to sort of select exactly what we're looking for and be able to leverage those advantages at that time.
And I think be in a better position to answer your question is, is it changing people's usage? Do I use less electricity because I get a report that says I used a lot yesterday or something? Certainly from a service point of view, you know it right away when someone's power's out. We probably will use more electricity as we'll get their power back on quicker.
Yeah, that's true.
So
It certainly is a reliability component.
yeah, that it certainly helps that. But as Scott said, we are, our reliability is improving substantially. I don't think we, I think we generally hear from a customer when their power is out, and occasionally we don't. But, we're not that big that we have service all over the countryside, so we have in tune customers that let us know if their power's out.
Yeah, we're a small enough utility that literally the message will come out, John, here's the phone number, his power's out, go talk to him, right? And our power line technicians phone him up and say, okay, I'll be right over. Like, that's kind of our response. So that's the other benefit of being a small utility, is that we can still provide that kind of service.
Thank you.
Okay, so one of the pieces that we are working on, we're talking about reliability, so we're called this the North Shore Capacity Review. This was something I had mentioned to council. Certainly, we've talked about how to improve reliability on the North Shore. There was a number of projects floated to do that. One was upgrading the transformer at Coffee Creek. One was a new substation interconnection at 6 Mile area. And the third was the battery energy storage system. So I had a project this year to take a look at those three so that we actually had real numbers that we could talk about with council on the benefits of those. So the first item, I'll go backwards. So we talk about the battery storage. So that is a grant application that we've submitted to Investors Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. They said that they would be letting us know if that grant was successful in the summer of 2023. I was holding out for a call on Thursday, the last day of summer, but it didn't come in, so I have no new news on that funding. The project was originally estimated at $6.4 million. This review, we were hoping that the market would have eased up and that the prices would have come down. It didn't, so it's 7.2, which is a 2% increase, which is less than inflation, but it's still a big number and a bigger number than what we had originally budgeted. So we'll take a hard look at that if we get the grant approved. We'll take a hard look at that and come back to council moving forward, because there's still almost $5 million that Nelson Hydro would have to invest for the battery storage. Now, the justification, the main focus for that was peak shaving, and there is a business case. If you remember, we were sitting at around 14-year payback on that battery system that would last 20 years. So it was kind of on the edge there in terms of whether it was viable, but absolutely we'll take a look at it as soon as we get confirmation there. The other piece that was, and the reason we lumped it in with the North Shore Capacity Review, is that if we located it on the North Shore, it would also have some reliability benefits. And so we wanted to compare that to the other major capital projects that we were looking at for reliability on the North Shore. So the new North Shore sub, located at 6 Mile, interconnected to Forest BC, gives us another point of interconnection, which allows us to feed the North Shore from multiple locations should we have an outage.
Yep.
That came in at $7.2 million, so it's still a big number. And the replacing the transformer at Coffee Creek came in at just under $3 million. But there's a caveat on that because that would be owned and the project would be completed by Fortis BC. So this is us independently. We did have Fortis look at both of these projects and give us their high-level assessment on what they would mean to them. The next step would be for us to pay them more money, or pay them some money to give us a cost estimate. I suspect that it's going to come in similar to what we've got here at that 3 million, or maybe a bit more, given that it'd be flowing through Fortis. So right now, with those kinds of numbers, the reliability on the North Shore has been good this year, as I've said. It still has opportunity to improve, but our vegetation management has done quite a bit, and some of the other reliability initiatives have done quite a bit. So I'm not seeing a huge incentive to spend that kind of capital. I certainly don't have anything budgeted for 2024 for the either of the other two projects, the transformer or the new substation. We do have the battery storage system budget in our capital plan for this year, pending a decision to move forward with that.
Yes.
So I would just, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the cost benefit of, if you took the money you'd spent on the battery storage and just sunk it into year-over-year veg management, really robust veg management program. Being someone who lives over there, I mean, the reliability has been incredible. So the last, since sort of like 2021, it's just been wonderful. But that was a massive storm, and that initiated a lot of veg management. And so, kind of feels like if we keep on going down the path we're going down, where we're obviously upgrading and replacing our substations, but also doing excellent veg management. Do we need battery storage?
Yeah. Well,
So-
we'll cross that path once we have that. But right now, the reliability benefits are not justifying any investment in the North Shore. And the battery system, the grant, 12.4 million. That's a big chunk of money that Canada, could potentially offer. But it's still a big investment for the utility to be able to do that, and we still have to maintain it, and that's increasing operating expenses and things like that, as well as just the capital expenditure. So,
Okay, thank you.
And
go ahead.
quick comment on, once we get the Mill Street substation upgrade done, shouldn't there be improved reliability to the North Shore in terms of demand? Isn't that the feeder that goes over there?
Yeah. One of the feeders, T40, feeder 40, is primarily dedicated to the North Shore.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
And there was all that upgrade work which we did in Lakeside Park area, right, already. So
New cable across
the cable.
Yeah. No, we should have good reliability with that whole system going out there, and the new transformers are slightly larger than the older ones. So, that will be able to reliably feed all of the North Shore from this end. It was coming the other way, that the other, having a bigger transformer on the other end would allow us to then feed more people. Because if the line is cut right now at 1 mile, we got no service between 1 mile and Redfish where we feed from Coffee Creek, because that's as far as Coffee Creek can normally feed during a cold weather event.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing. I've got a couple of graphs here to give you an idea of where our budgets are for this year. So right now, based on what we know, we think that we're going to be slightly over budget in our operating and maintenance for 2023. The primary driver of that is power purchases, and I'll show you exactly sort of where we're at with those in number format, but the power purchases are higher than expected. Again, this is the small, like really small freshet this year. And on top of that, we had those high demand charges from the cold snap in the winter time that have carried on through, and we don't actually get any revenue from that. In addition, because most of our customers don't get charge demand, so we pay more because of that, but we haven't been recouping that.
Counselor Page.
I'm sure staff has run these numbers. I would be interested in seeing what the balance is between the power purchasing, the peak shaving, and potential benefits of a AMI system that can have differential rates to achieve outcomes such as reducing demand during peak times and reducing our reliance upon outsourced power during poor freshettes or poor performance years, and what that linkage would look like, because I have to imagine that's going to be one of the big components. Understanding, of course, the other regulatory pieces and why it might not be a project we want to chase in 2024.
Absolutely, those would be part of any of the calculations. Certainly, battery storage, AMI, like all those things, are going to have some impact on our power purchase cost. That's why we've been focusing on that, it is by far the biggest expense that we have as a utility is the purchased power, and it's increasing every year. We used to say it was 45%, and then it was 50%. Now I think I've got a graph coming up. I think it's 53% of our overall budget is purchased power.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, I think somewhere in this needs to be factored in that, like this year, we're drought level 4 and 5 across the province. Could very well happen next year, so we have low freshet. Higher demand, more people electrifying, and just seeing maybe running some tabletop experiments on like what that would mean if we had, let's say, 2 years of low water flow, heavy drought. Not sure if those kind of calculations have been done, but what that might mean for our ratepayers.
Yeah, so we're trying to balance that model, and I'll talk a little bit about later on when we start looking at the 2024 budget numbers, but trying to create a model that accurately predicts what future energy consumption is going to be, that then sort of feeds into our power purchases and revenue as a result of that. We're trying to refine that as best as we can to predict that. So, we've used four-year averages and things like that, but we also sort of seeing that we're not, next year we under budgeted for what we're spending in power this year based on those factors. So now we got to try and figure out how to account for that. So I'll talk about that when we get to the 2024 budgeting.
Thank you.
In a second here. So
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
yeah.
I'm watching Councillor Lockenberg, who I think is going to tell me the answer to this, or because I can tell he's deep in thought there. I just, we talk about power purchases, and like maybe I don't get it, but like I don't see that we're ever going to be buying less power. Like, is there some magic button that I forgot to hear, or you forgot to send me the invite to the email? But like every time we build another house, every time we build another apartment building, every time there's more growth out on the North Shore, which has had huge building numbers in the last couple of years. And while we have a building code that says that we are going to be all electric by 2030, 2025, Councillor Lockenberg, or 2030? 2030. I'm not too sure what the magic bullet is that makes power purchases less, because we know what we can make in the city of Nelson. We know what the dam's capable of. It's great that, a strong freshet is good, or maybe an atmospheric river, as long as it doesn't put pressure on the dam, but we know what we make. And everything else that we need, we have to buy. And I'm just, did I miss something? Is the way that power purchases somehow going to go down in the next 10 to 20 years?
No,
No,
we're
no.
predicting steady load growth, out to the future. It's not a hockey stick. We were worried about that. We did do the electrification study this year. We'll present on that sort of in October when we go into more detail, but we're not seeing we're gonna suddenly go way up and have a significant impact on our infrastructure like that. But it is absolutely a steady growth within our region in terms of demand, electricity consumption, and our water rights are fixed, and no real viable projects to increase capacity currently on the book. So it's going to continue to be
Currently.
Current.
There's always things.
It was the
that I
pun.
think will
It was a
come up
pun,
in the
yeah.
future, yeah.
Councillor Page.
I hear you, and inside of this number, that's where I'm asking, what is our ROE on AMI when we're looking at this number? What kind of impact can that have on restraining the growth in this particular purchase category, and therefore, year over year, does it pay itself out, just even scaffolded within power purchases, when we start to create some rate pressures on the peak sides? And will it therefore allow us to pay for it, or will it not?
The preliminary study that we had done last year indicated that there was, limited payback from AMI, from the tangible, measurable things that they could capture.
Okay.
The future demand side management, things like that, they didn't look at. That would be part of the next study that we would have to go to much more detail in order to be able to calculate what our actual ROE would be.
So supplemental, through the chair, are we talking that the technology and the implementation of AMI 1.0 currently isn't seeing the paybacks in those other utilities that gives us confidence, or is it that technology, when implemented inside of our current bylaw and rate structure, wouldn't achieve that, or is that what a phase 2 might explore, or is it just that they don't pay them? It's not enough of savings.
Yeah. So the low hanging fruit of reduced labor, increased efficiency, things like that. Those are not showing a sufficient return for investment in AMI, certainly of the 9 million.
Yep.
The recommendation from the study was to look at it further and to try and quantify some of the lesser tangible items. Now, part of that too is going to be, as other utilities implement some of these more advanced demand side management programs and other things, we'll have more data to be able to compare those two or to measure those against and say, okay, this is what this utility saw when they implemented in terms of how much people reduced their consumption or shifted their loads, or human nature is hard to quantify sometimes in these studies, especially when you get an engineering study going. I think they're a bit hesitant to try and pin down and say, yes, 25% of the people are going to
It needs to come
use
with
less.
a rate design that goes with it. Right?
The,
They have to be tied.
I would say if New Westminster is gone live or is about to go live, although they're population-wise bigger than us, I think that they would be a very interesting comparison, or if they will share their data, just to look at where they developed any efficiencies, because New Westminster is very much in many ways like Nelson. It's very progressive. It's got a young group of people that live there that really are looking at ways to make the world a better place, and embrace the ideas of GHG reductions and moving into the electrical arena. And so I think that, like I say, the population's going to skew it a little bit, because obviously, if you save one staff person and that's $100,000, that's a nice savings. But I mean, we are such a small utility. Like when you talk about the low hanging fruit, I remember when they wanted to automate the food services at Kootenay Lake, and they realized that they actually needed to have one more staff person to have the rehydrated meals to go through the rehydration line than what we actually had in the kitchen to actually cook the meals fresh. That it didn't work. The automation didn't save any money. But I would say New Westminster, if they're about to go live, I think to look at what they start generating could be a very good comparison, just in terms of sort of the way New Westminster works and operates, and its basic population that's there. That's very progressive. So
Yeah. No, we will definitely be looking at all those utilities, and a good relationship with Ron Carley, who's the general manager there, and I'm sure we'd be able to get access to any statistics that they have to support the project.
If I may, Mayor, just to come back to your question about will our demand to Fortis ever go down? I guess theoretically, if you look at BC Hydro's numbers, whether you believe it or not, there is a scenario in which it could go down. Like if the AMI 2.0, if the peak shaving from the battery is as good as theoretically it could be, I guess there is a scenario. But I think all of those are dependent on how good we are at, socializing the community to take advantage of that, right? Like, and being good partners in the whole demand side management thing.
Yeah, well, and I think that we need to continue that work of just telling people that, make sure you turn the lights off, just like we tell them to not run the water when you're brushing your teeth. I mean, I think that conversation starts now, and that's often, as we know, the best success comes from the one-to-one conversation, not the big brother to the to society conversation. So it's just a matter of how we deliver the message, and we need to be starting to save power now, not in 2030.
And it's a great comparison back to the water work we did, because once you have that finite detail of what's going on in power, you'd be surprised how much power a blown compressor or pump sitting on your property can consume, but not having a sense, like we did with the commercial water meters, of knowing that you have a toilet that's running in the basement all the time, and it's the vast majority of what's dripping out of your system on a regular basis, gives the customer and ourselves the capacity to go find those, pinpoint them, and alleviate those power draws, because we can't get that kind of finite detail.
Although we meter, so
Yeah, we
So
see
you do
that.
pay
You do
for-
see it.
you do
Yeah,
pay for
but
what
now-
you, it's not day by day or hour by hour, but customers certainly notice when their bills are out of whack with what they expect. I think Fortis, they went to inclining rates and they dropped that, did they not?
Yeah, they're backing off their inclining rates. Fortis BC Hydro has just introduced voluntary time of use rates, to try and, shift peak and that sort of thing. So there's some good examples for us to look at there. And, from a energy conservation perspective, I do want to give a shout out. I mean, our climate and energy team is doing a great job, because our load forecast is not nearly as steep as our growth forecast in the community. Like, we're building a lot more houses and there's a lot more people moving to this area, than at a rate that is higher than what we are forecasting the load growth. So we're seeing that, the new houses that are coming online are much more efficient. People are adopting those energy efficiency initiatives. So that's why we're able to just be growing slowly. We're not seeing sort of, the big hockey stick curve or anything like that we maybe, when you drive around and you see the amount of development occurring. I know I've been anxious, like, how is this going to impact us? But we're not seeing that, because those buildings are much more efficient than previous.
Appliances are,
Yeah.
Yeah.
all of those things
Yeah.
are so much more efficient.
Our new house will be
And they
net
wanna talk
zero,
to
and
smart
we'll
meter.
actually feed the old house. We're gonna have
They
one
wanna
service
talk
so
to
we can
smart
feed the old house.
The new appliances.
I just
Councilor Wood.
thank you, Mayor. I was just thinking on the long lines of our water savings too, how we are growing, but we're actually able to get all these savings because of the efficiencies in our water use. So maybe I guess it's similar with electrical use.
Yep.
Yeah, and we don't meter people's houses. So I mean, that's is there a comparison there between this metering for electricity and metering water meters for people's houses? I mean, someday we might have to go down that road in terms of metering water if drought and stuff continues. But, at this point, we've gone out to the community and said, be a good citizen, and, and the rule applies not only to water, but to electricity. So, Councillor Will Hockenberg.
Just one more thing. I don't see it in the plans. So the electrification of the ferry, is that something we're still keeping our eyes on?
Yeah, it was part of the battery storage study. So just sort of looking at sort of, how we could, incorporate some sort of preparation for that. It is tentatively sort of like in our load forecast, but we're not actually, like jumping anything up here until we actually get something real from the Ministry of Transport, but they've been talking, they approached us at the beginning of the year, said, yeah, we're gonna accelerate our plan. Originally, it was gonna be the 2030 for electrification. They indicated that they were going to bring that forward a number of years, but we have yet to see a design, so we've not included it in any of our rates for 2024.
I have a follow-up, Mayor.
Yes.
Should we then, assuming they're serious about accelerating that to 2028, maybe what we should be doing is putting the battery storage and that sort of gap we have in funding it as a stop on that plan? Like, hey, if you are hoping to draw power from us, we need this plan. We need to start sooner than later, or else any hope you have of delivering that electrified ferry by 2028 or whatever it is off the table. And that might unlock some funding there to get that storage.
Yeah, for sure. They would be required to pay for any system upgrades as a result of electrification of the ferry. We just don't know exactly how they're planning on doing that. We don't have any, really good load forecasts or anything like that yet. But we included in the battery storage because we said, well, if we want to sort of, for putting in a battery storage system, maybe there's an expansion that could, leverage some of that would help that project. But we haven't costed it out or anything yet until we see something from Ministry of Transport that is concrete that we can actually start to make measurements. They may choose to, have us upgrade the line from Coffee Creek. Maybe they'll pay for the transformer upgrade. I'm not sure. That would be nice, but we'll
That's
see
who should
how
pay
it-
for that is Fortis.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that if we're saying that we're not, and this is part of our rate application to BCUC, that if the North Shore is we're not making money, then any additional development on the North Shore, in particular, such a big project like that ferry, puts additional pressure on the residents, because essentially the whole theory of the case has been that Nelson residents are subsidizing our North Shore
Yeah.
outside residents. That's worse. So I just worry about that a bit, and I think maybe this is a story here we can tell that will unlock some potential money to do these, start making these projects happen, knowing the time it's going to take to get them going. And if you are thinking about a 2028, then we've got to start these things now. Like, otherwise, that number is meaningless. That your ambitions.
The other, we need a decision on COSA. One of the things that we've identified is that area of the North Shore has been fed directly by Fortis and not through our own generation. And if we have to use our own generation for that ferry project, you impact every other, definitely the urban customer and every other customer. So that decision's critical for us, that they recognize that that generation is not coming from our power plant, it's coming directly from Fortis. And however we feed that ferry project, to me, it has to come directly from Fortis.
If you're okay, Mayor Morrison, if I keep on moving forward? Yeah. So I just so you get a sense, this is our capital budget. We're predicting to be under budget for capital this year. And that's primarily just a shift in cash flow in our Mill Street project. So that's going fine. So as a quick summary of where we think we're going to be at the end of 2023. So this is our year-end forecast. So just slightly under in revenue. Again, the heating degree days in 2023 have actually been lower by a couple of degrees than average. So we believe that's why we're under there. Our power purchases, I spoke to that already. Shorter freshet and that cold snap that's creating a demand charge that we're seeing. The operating expenses, we're a little bit over with the operating expenses. The regulatory costs have been a piece of that. We've had a number of different things that we haven't, like even the 85,000 PACA costs, as well as the cybersecurity. All those things are showing up in our budget, even though we think we will be able to recoup them in future years. They're still showing here. There's also some costs, just looking at where we're at. We're over budget on training for this year, and those have been some conscious choices around our safety program as we've advanced that and making sure we're in compliance. We've been doing a lot more training, especially on our electrical safety program. And that includes also some higher than expected PPE. So getting all of the arc flash rated clothing for the crews has also bumped us over in our PPE budget. But that's what's accounting for that 1% overages. Capital expenditures, as I said, we're under primarily due to cash flow.
And I think, on a $22 million budget to be within 1%, on a operating expenses of almost 8 million, again, being within 1% is, I think, pretty incredible that we're able to manage, even with some of these unknowns. The power purchases, the ratchet expense, we need to get a deferral account for that. It's a totally uncontrollable expenditure by ourselves, and for the utility to have to, absorb that when, either way, we could be on the other side of it and have a, positive year on that end, but that should flow through to those customers on either account, not the utility having a higher or lower return based on the fact that we had one cold night in December.
So the numbers, the 99 below on revenue, the 105, 101 on those others puts us like net something. I don't know. Obviously not 6%, but some sort of net hit to the budget, I'm assuming. Is that right?
Well, it doesn't necessarily carry over to the 2024 budget, but and that's what Kevin's talking about. Is we will be applying. Our intention is to apply with our revenue requirements application this time is for a budget variance account that allows us to flow that into future years. If you do have a variance for non-controllable costs, it's Fortis BC has one. Similar to that, they do have some incentive, and it's a bit more complicated than just sort of straight taking, okay, you were underspent this year, transfer out the next year, or vice versa. But that's what we're hoping that we can do for next year.
Yeah, so we're taking a hit of about $500,000. Yeah, having a slightly warmer year overall, and having a very cold day last December or something. So both things totally out of our control. And that's the city as the equity owner is losing $500,000. No, can't. We can on the urban side, because we flow that through our reserves, right? So on the urban side, yeah, we could adjust rates, but on the rural side, we just eat it. And that's why we need these deferral accounts that, we're not in a position to, eat those costs when believe we're not even making a full return on the, we know we're not at this stage.
Okay, so I'd like to shift focus to our 2024 budget. So just a short slide on some of the highlights of what's going into the budget. So we talked earlier about 4.83% Fortis rate increase. I don't know if that's going to go up. It's possible, maybe even likely, that they'll choose to increase that, even if it's just to capture the 2023 stuff and move it into 2024. I suspect they'll probably try and blend that into a few years, so it may not be too big of an impact, but we'll see. The number we're using for inflation is 5.62%, and that's based on CPI from July.
Yeah, CPI from July, taking a 12-month average of the July 2022 to 23, taking a 12-month average on CPI in BC, and that's 5.62. Same format as Fortis BC uses, and the same format we used last year.
And we haven't got a determination from the BCUC that this is correct, but this is what we did last year, so we're doing it again this year until told otherwise. They did ask us a whole bunch of questions about, why we're doing it this way, but we think we're, following the exact same thing as what Fortis is doing, so it should be a sound assumption. So I've said we're gonna continue to focus on reliability. One of the pieces in here is our veg management, so we're still gonna be investing heavily in veg management. This budget currently includes basically holding the veg management budget the same as last year for the next 2 years, or next year is primarily there. That's more than what we had forecast 3 years ago when we first started this program with vegetation management. We had said, okay, by 2024, we think we're going to start to be able to bring it down. The feedback I'm getting from the crews that have been working is that they're seeing a lot higher growth than what we had anticipated in that 3 years, and they felt like we needed to maintain a higher level. It is something we'll continue to look at as we finalize this budget, but it's currently at the same level as we have in the last 3 years, essentially.
So,
Yes.
so that, the growth rate is big rainfall, then big heat, and plants are loving it.
Yeah, we had a great summer. Like, I don't know if you've seen, I don't know, my trees at home.
Yeah,
Everything just grew, meters. Yeah, so that's what we're seeing out in the field. So, the crews are saying, hey, we need to continue on at this level if we're going to be able to maintain it.
It's an interesting sort of outcome of climate change. That if the wetness is there, the plants just love it with the increase in CO2 and warmth.
So we're also going to continue to focus on safety, fully implement our electrical safety program, and I know the city's been working on overall occupational health and safety programs, which we'll also implement. So we have some funds in there specifically to put our safety initiatives in place and make sure that they are sustainable and will continue on in the future. The IBEW contract, there's 2 increases in 2024, so averaged out for the year comes out to 4.21% for the crews. And then the power purchase forecast. So you remember from my note here, the power purchases, we were 105%. And I talked earlier about how, are we calculating it correctly? So we have made an adjustment up. We're being conservative with our freshet duration. We're being conservative with that. We've included the Fortis rate increases as we know them currently. And then we've also said, okay, well, we're under budgeting. We think, when we look at the number of gigajoule or gigawatt hours that we're predicting for future years relative to what we've seen in the last 4 years, the 2020 year is bringing that down because it was a really long freshet and it was the COVID kind of slowdown. And when we take that out, we're kind of seeing a higher number that we want to carry into next year. So it matches more closely with what we've seen in the last 2 years. We were very close in 2021 and 2022, around 88 gigawatt hours for the year. So we're trying to shift that up higher. So it's a number that results in about 12% more power purchase costs than what we had budgeted last year.
Sorry, I got muddled. I thought like 2 or 3 paragraphs ago you said we sold less power than we thought we would this year. Did you not put that?
So revenues, yes, but consumption and demand charges. The model is showing that and I'm not taking into account, like this year we had lower heating degree days. We're predicting normal consumption, and then you add in the demand charges, and then the Fortis BC rate increase, and then forecasting an amount that's going to be similar to what we've seen in the last 2 years for power purchases.
I am just a simple girl. That was too many words. Say it again. We're using less.
So this year,
Yes.
in terms of our revenue, the amount of
Yes.
money that we're bringing in,
Yes.
we're forecasting lower than expected revenues
For the 2023.
for 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, versus budget.
Less
Now-
revenue. We're going to get less than we thought we would get.
Shape.
That's right, yeah, and the revenues do mirror power purchases to some extent because the revenue comes primarily from energy used in kilowatt hours. So the amount of energy that people are using, they get, the revenues is a direct relationship to that. Where the challenge is the demand that we've seen this year, we're expecting is going to continue into next year, is that high peak demand in kilowatts. And so we pay for that, but we don't get any revenue in compensation over and above that.
And lower for a share here, budgeting.
Yeah, we're budgeting for an average. We've taken the 4-year average for a shed.
So that means we make that up with power purchases, so we're generating less of our own and buying more power from Fortis in the 20.
Correct. Yeah.
Because of the peak.
No, so on, as Scott said, on, our power purchases are made up of two components. The energy, so that's how much people use over the year, and then the peak or demand is another, it's more of it's a flat charge based on your peak demand in the year. So you only need 1 hour of excessive high demand. We pay for that all year long.
Yeah, gotcha.
And then
We're
the
trying to
other
make up for that in rates, and that's why we bumped up our forecast.
Yeah. And the other piece of that is the freshet. So we can generate more, so we don't have to buy as much power from Fortis
During that time.
during that time. Yeah.
It's weird because it has to average over the year and it hurts my brain a little bit trying to picture the revenue, demand, use, and how it shifts depending on the time of year.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So this is just a summary of overall where the money is going. As I said, it's 52%. I think I said 53 earlier. My apologies. 52% is purchased power is what we're currently budgeting. And then the rest of the pie gets divided up from there. General operations, that's where we're capturing all of our regulatory costs and the general staff costs and things like that.
And I think you can clearly see in this graph the huge difference between purchasing power and generating power. So our generating power, which is basically our plant operations, 4%. Purchase power, 52%. That's the difference in rates between what we generate and what we purchase at.
Typically generate almost half of what we
Yeah.
consume.
So it's,
And, sorry,
Yes.
and just a point of clarification, by what we generate, we keep our taxes lower to our citizens because we have a revenue stream which we pay for things. Is that right? Like the,
so the model that we have is, like any regulated utility, we have the city as the owner has invested in these assets and we're allowed to make a return on those assets. That return we get, we invest back into the utility in part through your reserves, etc., and also the dividend, that comes through to the city to help fund other service, everything from recreation to parks to whatever. So yeah,
and we would have to do those, if we didn't have Nelson Hydro, we would have to get that money from somewhere, so
or have
it does actually make-
significantly less services.
right. Okay, thank you.
So moving on to capital, talked about Mill Street and the plan there already, so I think I've covered that. Our G3, G4 exciter should be finished early in the new year as well. We're going to continue on enhancing our GIS system. As I said, the battery storage is showing in the capital budget for expenditures, but that would only go forward if we approve that if council approves that project to move ahead. We identified as part of our audits, our generating station, our pressure vessels are not compliant anymore, and try as we might, we couldn't get any engineers to certify the riveted vessels that have been in service for 100 years, but it's hard to get somebody to sign off on those, and we need to do that from a regulatory perspective, so there's some cash there. I talked about the dam safety. Yeah. Well, no, what we're doing is we're going to replace the vessels. As much as it's really cool to have riveted vessels, it's way cheaper for us to replace them with something that is up to current codes. Dam safety repairs and scoping. So as I mentioned, the dam safety review, we did cost all of the capital for that. It comes to about $7 million over 10 years. We're going to start slow. We've got 130,000, I think, in 2024 capital budget to mostly do the scoping and put proper engineering designs behind what needs to happen. But then that's going to ramp up, and towards the end of that 10-year period, we're almost looking at about $1 million a year for major things like refurbishing each of the penstocks on G2, G3, and G4. Those are all buried pipes that are now wearing thin, so we need to remediate those, and a number of other smaller pieces in terms of the integrity of the dam. I've put cybersecurity on there, as we mentioned. That's something that we need to move forward. So a fair amount of effort that's going to have to happen in 2004 and 2005, the 2 years of the pilot project, in order for us to fully comply with the NIST framework. And then I mentioned earlier that we do have some work on G2 and then the G5 generator that we have planned for 2024 in our capital plan.
I'm sorry, I thought you said earlier that we had finished all the maintenance on
G5 was finished, overhauled and
G5
completed.
generator, so the turbine is complete.
Okay.
But the generator we didn't
Okay.
touch.
Oh, thanks.
And
Thank
so we do need to do some testing and cleanup of the generator. All right, so this is the pie chart that shows how we're allocating those funds out. So Mill Street, as I mentioned, is the bulk of that at 40%. Pole replacements, that's an ongoing project. We'll see sort of numbers in the same amount every year because we divided the whole service area up into 8 equal parts, and we just survey the same number of poles every year and allocate a number to be replaced based on historical data. So
Rick, you have a question?
Just about the poles and the TELUS, are they still paying for
Yes.
the poles? So we'll see that 14% kind of show up on the revenue side.
Yeah. So there's some of that comes back in revenue. It doesn't offset the pole replacement that we put in capital, but it does show up in revenue. Yeah, and so they pay 50% of all poles that we have joint use on, and the agreement for maintenance, they are currently paying it, even though we still have not got the ink on paper to sign it, but they have paid for this year all of the maintenance fees for maintaining those poles. All right, so this is the summary. So our power purchases, as I mentioned, we bumped up what we were budgeting. So that's significantly more than what we're forecasting for this year end. Operating expenses slightly higher. Again, a number of different things, including regulatory costs and cybersecurity going into that. And then our capital expenditures a little bit higher for next year. Currently, these budget numbers are still very preliminary, they're preliminary. We're still tweaking what's in and what's out of next year and what we think we can complete. And then the Mill Street substation, just a comment there, we do have an insurance claim that should be going in, I think the 9th of October is the deadline for us to have that submitted, and so we've included the, what we are estimating to be the insurance claim as part of the Mill Street substation. This is the way we displayed it last year, so we did the same this year. Okay, so now to the revenue requirement. So this is the challenging piece. As I mentioned, we're trying to, make assumptions around what this looks like in terms of the cost of service model to gain the revenue that we need in order to be able to pay the bills. So the requirement is basically, what we need in order to meet all of our operational and capital needs for 2024. The rural rates will be based on the cost of service model that's been developed, and again, still a few items that are not fully finalized or approved by the BCUC, but we're making our best assumptions as to what those are. And the urban rates will be based, trying to make sure we have a healthy capital reserve, so coming out of that. And you may have an older version, but I did update this slide to, or add this slide to the deck that got sent out on Friday. We did get feedback from our consultants who we have been working with on our rate design. And right now with the budget, as I've just walked you through it, we're looking at between a 7 and a 9% rate increase for the rural area. It's higher than I would like by a long shot. And we're wanting to see what we can do about that, but that's what the model is currently producing in terms of when we take everything, which I'm hoping I explained, these are all things that I feel we need to do. This is the range that we're getting in terms of overall rate increase. As I mentioned, 2/3 of that is the increase in the power purchase forecast, which is tough because I was like, oh, well, we'll just reduce the forecast, but that doesn't really help us because then we're just under budgeting for next year. And I'm pretty confident that the number we have in there right now accurately reflects our best guesstimate, or estimate of what we're gonna have to pay next year for power purchases.
Councillor Wood, and
So
then Councillor Tate.
this is pretty major.
Yeah.
That's going to have a pretty major impact, or definitely like people are going to see that and go, whoa. So I'm wondering if this is going down, and it's mostly to do with purchasing from Fortis. Can we make sure if this is going to happen, that we get our communications out really early to the public, that it's not like we're just doing this because we want to, put a bunch of cash in our bank account. It's that we're paying much higher fees through Fortis. So I think that really is a communication piece that early, so people aren't feeling surprised by that, because that's a fairly large jump, and we really don't have much control. And I think people need to know that. So.
Everybody's gonna have this to watch. It's being
Yeah.
streamed, so.
I have a question.
Councillor Tate.
Back on an earlier slide there, we talked about the cybersecurity 2-year pilot.
Yes.
And there was something else that was unusual. It might have been when we were talking about the dam or the EDBC. Those sound to me like short-term things, not necessarily like ongoing operational things. But it sounds like it would get captured in this budget. Would it be possible to shift some of the reserves to those projects since they're short-term?
That would be a question, I think, for the financial team. We're currently, the only reserve that Nelson Hydro has is our capital reserve. So, if we can start to move some of those into operations or.
No, that's not
or
operations though. Is that operations if it's a short-term thing that's like a pilot project? That's not operations, right?
It would still be an operating expense versus a capital expense. And Nelson Hydro is, a little more fluid and because everything's captured in that utility. It just means, do reserves go up or down? I think we have to be careful on the rural side. The rural side doesn't have reserves to fund these type of expenditures. They're on a different model. And what I've seen on the city side of cybersecurity, this isn't a one-time expense. It's an ongoing expense, and a fairly significant ongoing expense. You have to have software that monitors attacks, etc. You need to pay potentially insurance to insure us in the event we get attacked. So those are some decisions that council needs to make. We're certainly working with our Municipal Insurance Association to try to understand that. I would hope, is there a possibility for MIA to pool this risk across the province as opposed to have individual local governments, all of us having to incur those in expenditures on our own. So I think there's some work to do there. So we can,
That's what citizen services is
Okay.
reaching towards, right? In terms
Yeah.
of providing local governments with resources and templates to be cyber secure as a
Yeah.
function.
yeah,
That's
if
the
they,
aspiration.
if they can have that, like I said, monitoring software, whatever, they can purchase that provincially and us all pay into that, or they provide it ourselves. So all those are early days. We can certainly look at, I don't know how much of this is ongoing and how much is a one time. I think
The dam inspection thing?
yeah, it's probably a small, tiny bit of this, or is it?
Yeah, I would like to clarify. So we do have capital. So the cybersecurity, there is a capital component that will be,
In the capital
one-time expenses in 24 and 25. And then there's ongoing expenses that we've budgeted for 24 and years going forward, based on the gap analysis that we did this summer. So those are built into the budget. So that, there's an operations component and there's a capital component. Similar for the dam safety component. There's the capital plan, like that 7 million over 10 years that we're currently estimating to address all the currently identified deficiencies. But there's also ongoing dam safety requirements that we need to be able to meet. And those aren't huge. They're not really impacting this budget in any way, but they all add up. Because we've got similar things for occupational health and safety, and we've got similar things for technical safety BC, and so the engineers engineers and geoscientists of BC, that permit practice management plan. We last year put a bunch of effort into getting that plan in place. Now it's just ongoing costs. So we've an audit this year. Hopefully that will be done in this year. So I've actually budgeted anything for 2024. We do continue. We have ongoing costs for developing our standards and making sure that all of our engineering standards are stamped and meet the requirements. And there'll be some ongoing maintenance, but those aren't big costs. They're not going to move the dial on our overall rate increase as much as I'd like to try and and we will absolutely scrutinize every line item. I just received sort of the results of the COSA model this weekend, and it's I was expecting it to be high, but I'm disappointed that it is as high as what it is currently indicating. So we'll fine tune what we can.
I think a couple areas that, one is if we can carry this reserve account for things like ratchet, these demand fees, etc., that would allow us not to, budget conservatively for those costs. So I think that's something that if the Utility Commission allows that we can smooth some of this. Regulatory costs, as you know, we've pushed back on the Utility Commission that we don't see that's value for customers. I don't know what we have budgeted in this year's budget for regulatory costs, but they're significant. So those are two areas that I think if we're successful in those two areas, that we might be able to smooth this a little bit and not have to build in those that big jump in power purchase cost. So I don't know what your thoughts in terms of the utility commission, because we didn't apply, or did we apply for that grant? The other one I had was storm reserve account. What are we budgeting for that, and is it?
Yeah, so the storm reserve we just carried on with the same methodology that we used last year, which is the 5-year average.
Yeah. So that's another one that we've asked for a deferral account on and her reserve account on that, we reduced last year's budget significantly to reduce that rate impact. And we're fortunate we didn't have any large storms this year, but we're at risk of that if the utility commission doesn't approve that. And from the IRs and the interveners, it seemed that, that wasn't something they were pushing back on too much. So we're hopeful that that happens. But, we've never, our challenge partly is, if you look at a Fortis or a BC Hydro, they have like 30 of these deferral accounts, and they're juggling 30 different things. We're significantly at risk because we really have asked for kind of 1 or 2 of these accounts where they'd have 30 for all these expenditures, and we've lost $500,000 this year on the utility because we don't have those reserve accounts.
You had a follow-up, Councillor Tate?
I was just curious if the GIS sounds like a big, super cool thing, and this is somehow going to piggyback with all of our other GIS initiatives. It's all going to be one system in the end, one City of Nelson system, and there can be hydro layers and whatever other layers.
Yeah, so Hydro's kind of led the way but purchased the license for the city as a whole. So so that's the goal. And just to be clear, this is, I think sometimes it gets confused with what the RD is doing for really development services. We're already doing this work on AutoCAD and probably spreadsheets and paper napkins and a few other things. So these are, we're already doing this work. It's not like we're just replacing our internal system with a much more sophisticated internal system.
And we're hoping it's going to improve, well, our expectation is it will improve efficiencies for sure, because we don't usually write on napkins, but most of the data is tracked on multiple spreadsheets. So often, our designers or others are, entering the same information in 4 different places, and if they forget on one, then our records aren't accurate, and now we're losing efficiency as we're trying to solve an issue because some data is not matching, and you got to figure out which is right. So the GIS will be one source of truth for all of us. So we're using the Esri utility networks platform, which is specifically designed for utilities to be able to manage their assets, the linear assets, and be able to track all that data in one place where everything about a particular pole or a particular transformer or line all go, so that people can rely on it. So, and it's going really well. It just takes time for us to implement, and that's all currently being coded to capital right now. We've not made any changes to the overall O&M because, as Kevin was saying, we're already doing these things, and if anything, we're hoping it's going to result in efficiencies, which probably means that we can then do more stuff as opposed to have fewer costs. So we'll just use the same people to do extra things, to do additional things that are going to enhance this service we provide.
So you've put the 7 to 9 there, and you haven't put anything by the urban rate increases expected to be slightly lower. So does that mean if rural is 9, city is 8? Like, what's the inference there? I mean, it's, there's going to be people there that I can just imagine what for those that look at Facebook tonight, I'm sure there'll be quite the explosion of comments for those that are watching. Yeah, like, can you give me a percentage that could be the number that's there?
We haven't run the data for the urban yet. As I said, we just got this on the weekend. We took a look at it this morning. I added it in just because I knew that the council needed to know this, and I was really trying to make sure we had something. to at least give you an understanding of what we're going to be looking at. But I don't have a percentage rate increase for the urban yet, or even a range. And as I said, we're still trying to tweak the budget, and we'll do what we can. But my expectation is it will be lower because we have a different cost structure the way it works with the urban side.
But you're not going to come back to this table and tell us, oh, it's going to be 4 in the city, but it's going to be 8 in the rural district.
I'm not planning on telling you that, no.
Council controls, what level of reserves we
Oh, sure.
have, what,
Exactly.
What,
We could make the city
dividend?
112. I
Yeah.
mean, that is that I guess that's the point that sometimes get lost, is that the urban rate is whatever the 7 people around this table decide it is. I mean, it's, BCUC doesn't have any comment on that whatsoever. But again, I mean, we've been doing this COSA for a long time. We know that the costs are higher for multiple reasons in the rural area. A 7 or 8% increase is gonna just be as shocking to the urban ratepayers as it is to the rural ratepayers.
and I guess the one that is flexible is how much you want to spend on vegetation management. So we've increased that substantially over the years. I think I heard Scott say, we're hoping to bring that down once we had done this work, but the recommendation is not. But that's the flux you have in this budget. People are going to use electricity. We have to buy power at basically 12 times what we're producing it internally. So all new demand is at that much higher rate. So the impact of our own generation is having a lesser and lesser impact on rates, and new growth is having a much higher impact on rates. We're we're trying to manage that on with our agreement with BC Hydro, that we're not selling at very cheap rates and buying at really high rates. So that's something that we're working on. Hopefully we're successful there. But really it is the vegetation management. If you want rates to come down by 3%, you spend 3% less on, whatever that dollar amount is, 200,000 or 300,000 less on vegetation management. There's not much else you have any flux in this budget.
Councillor Woodward, you have a question?
Yeah, this is because we have so little control over that power purchase, that to communicate to the public that this is where efficiencies when you're in your own home can, if you're reducing the usage in your own home, if you can install that, then it really does make a difference, especially as these power purchases have to increase. So it is kind of like in a way, it's a push towards efficiency, like the water. But although we aren't metering the water, but
Yeah.
That's a good communication tool to the public that.
Yeah, if you want to save 7, not have a rate increase, you should argue 7%.
At peak times.
At all times.
Anytime.
Anytime.
At all times.
We don't have peak rates
No.
For residents.
because we don't have AMI.
Yeah, it would.
But yeah, reducing our peak, yes, exactly.
Even more. at peak times,
Sensitive to time, this meeting was scheduled to be from 2 until 4, and we're just a few minutes ahead of 4. I did kind of tell everybody a white lie and told them that it went till 4:30, just because, because that's always the way these meetings go. But I'm just wondering, Scott, we've heard it. We're all now sitting and musing and chewing on it a little bit. Is there any particular direction that you're looking for from us currently for you to go back and take another round on this? Have you heard from us what we hear are our concerns? Is there, there, you got it there. Direct Nelson Hydro staff to continue to refine the budgets and rate design to reduce the impact to ratepayers. I think that's the message that we're trying to deliver here. Is there anything else that you
Yeah.
needed from us at this junction? I imagine you're gonna be back, obviously, mid-month. I don't think you're gonna line up with a council meeting, so we'll be having probably a workshop on hydro again, trying to get this achieved for, the end of October. I mean, maybe we'll have one more meeting, and then the end of October, we can have a special meeting attached to the cow that day, because I think that we have a very late cow in October, but, anything else for us now?
So, yeah, what has happened in the past in terms of the process, presented to council, received feedback, and then gone away, and then come back to council with my whole team to present a more fulsome picture of the budget and plans. If council's willing, I'd like to do that again. I think I had, said somewhere around the 20th of October. I don't know if it's been scheduled in anybody's calendars, but that was sort of the date that I'd thrown out some time ago to staff about when it would be appropriate to where we would be ready to do that. In the meantime, I have public consultation. So on Thursday, I will be meeting at the Nelson Innovation Center from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. I will be presenting substantially the same information as what council has received here today to any members of the public who would like to come and ask me questions directly. I have another one scheduled for the North Shore residents at De Balfour Hall on October 12th to get their input. They've been, some of the more local customers and ratepayers who appreciate having some information about it. So I'll provide an opportunity then. And in that intervening time, I'm going to continue to work with my staff. And I did add that last second bullet just once I saw the rate, and I said, okay, well, I know that I need to go back. So if council chooses to direct me, that would be a more incentive. But really, it's a challenge. We looked at the budget very hard last year with the 9.87% rate increase. We the original number came up over 10. We said, we can't do that. So we really looked hard at our budget last year to sharpen our pencil and said, this is what we absolutely need to have. So the low-hanging fruit's already been picked, but we will take another look and see where we can trim anything that even is a remotely discretionary from next year to try and bring that number back down, because I know it's hard on ratepayers to have two significant rate increases in a row. Just the forces of the world right now are just all conspiring to create a situation where I've got high inflation, I've got lots of costs, we've got aging infrastructure that needs to be done, I've got regulatory activities that I'm being directed to do, so I don't have a whole lot of discretion in what's left in the budget, but I will do my best to see if we can trim again.
So we have a couple more questions. Councillor Page, followed by Councillor Tate.
Kind of in large scope, that's part of getting these COSAs in place, is to get the model locked down for that certitude and reliability going forward. I heard a number of reasons why we are scoping out the rate design as currently mapped out in front of us. What I was wondering is it simple enough to start a regulatory process to ask for these deferral accounts so that we can start to take those conservative assumptions and smooth them out over the long term without complicating the rest of the regulatory ask to the BCUC to just package up what deferral accounts we think we need, from storm to freshet to demand peaks, and get those in place so we can start incorporating that into our design in future years? Is that something we can start now?
Well, we have a few before the Utility Commission right now. That's why we're waiting on the 2023 rate application, because now we're into 2024. We don't know if they're approving those yet. So the storm reserve deferral account we asked for, and then we did ask for a...
It's a variance account for any difference in their decision that results in a difference between what we have been taking in for rates in 2023 and what the BCUC orders. So if they say, no, it shouldn't be 9.87, it should be
Yeah.
10.5,
Got
or
that
it should
one.
be 7.2, then we have a variance account that would allow us to defer any differences into future years. The
Leave the
storm,
benefit out, yeah.
the storm reserve account is also with the BCUC for consideration to allow us to accumulate a reserve. I believe, to answer your question, Councillor Page, is that I believe it's as simple as just asking. We haven't, these two that we've got in place right now are the first two deferral accounts we've ever asked for. And it seems like it's just a matter of asking, and they ask us a bunch of questions about how we want to manage those, and then they'll give us an answer.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure, but it seems like it's that simple. So we have plans right now to include a budget variance account, deferral account in the 2024 rate application, as well as, the deferral account for the participant assistance cost awards and the cybersecurity. So there's a number of things that we've identified. The cost of living credit, so there's a positive balance in that cost of living credit that we gave out. It's not huge, it's about $30,000, but we want to, make sure that goes to our ratepayers. So we've asked to include that in the 2024 rate application as well. So we think there's ways that we can spread out some of these costs into the future, and we will be including those in the application.
The challenge is you have to go through the rate application for them to get approved. So we can't get them approved in advance of submitting our rate. So,
More my question. Yeah.
so
okay.
if we can't, for example, say, we assume they're going to give us an account in case the ratchet is, or the demand charge is higher than we forecast, so we can forecast it, be generous on that, we'll do okay on that, and then find out they don't approve it, and now we're $200,000 in the hole like we were this year. So that's the challenge. That it'd be nice if we could get those approvals up front, and
But we can't request a decision simply and solely on those deferral accounts that, themselves outside of rate applications?
not that we're aware of. They go through every one of those accounts we've asked for have gone through the intervener process. They get to comment whether they think that's a good
Well,
idea,
just
what our
whether
methodology
processes.
is, et cetera, et cetera. So it is, as we talk about in this regulatory regime we seem to be in, and the rural side of it doesn't do us any favor.
Councillor Tate, and then Councillor Payne.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Payne.
I'm just going to take this opportunity to say that one of the best ways that the City of Nelson allows all of us to save money on our electricity bills is through the EcoSave program. Not only do we offer a 3.5% interest rate if you'd like to borrow the money to make those improvements, but the Canadian government is now offering a 0% interest rate on money that you would borrow to make those improvements. And if you have not taken advantage of that yet, it was huge when we just dramatically increased the level of insulation in our ceiling. The savings that we made paid themselves back in less than 18 months. So that way, really, you're investing in future lower purchases, which benefit us all. And it doesn't, that money may be an increase to what you weren't planning to spend, but at least it's going to that investment in your home. There was one other thing I was going to say on top of that, but that's basically it. The City of Nelson has this incredible opportunity that, the other thing I was going to say is because the housing starts are softening somewhat, it's not quite as difficult to get a contractor to do that work as it has previously been. And there's the next benefit is to our local contractors to make sure they have the work to get that job done for us. Just saying.
Thank you, Councillor Payne.
Next chair on top.
Couple of, can you just tell me, I was trying to write this down, I was writing down additional meetings, and then you told me the first one and I missed it. I've got Balfour, October the 12th. Where's your other additional meeting?
So
Thursday.
the Nelson Innovation Center this Thursday at 6:30 to 8:30 p.m.
Okay,
and Balfour on October 12th, the Balfour Hall on October 12th from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m.
okay, so it's this Thursday, the Nick. I knew there was something about that. I'm not gonna be here. Yeah, so, I appreciate the discussion on deferral accounts, and I'm pretty sure I have a good grasp on them, and I don't want it to be necessarily that you come back with it. It might be something, Nate, that you take away and talk with, CFO jury about, is that, you know, my problem with deferral accounts is I understand why they're there, and I also understand that big, multinational corporations like Fortis and Hydro have these things stockpiled up in the corners for forever. You know, Nelson is a very small place. And I just sort of think like, you know, if I defer household repairs, or I defer something, or I max out my credit card and can't make the 30% interest payment, you know, deferral accounts are great, but eventually you have to pay. And so my concern is I wouldn't want to see the hydro utility having 4 or 5 of these, and that's where we're slotting off the need to defer instead of actually paying. Because this is what gets small municipalities in trouble, when they think they can not do something, and then the whatever comes home to roost, or the piper comes to collect payment for the musical entertainment. So I would like to have a primer from finance, maybe a half an hour primer one day on deferred accounts. You can pick a hydro one if you want, but like in general on deferred accounts, and what payback looks like that in terms of cost benefit, because it does make me a little bit nervous as I sit in this position here to think that, oh yeah, I'm going to reduce that hydro cost, and then whoever the next guy is that's sitting in this chair is going, well, you know what, it's 15% because we got some things coming due. Anyways, I would like to have that education, and that could even be a workshop. That could be a workshop at one of our council meetings for half an hour. So
Yeah, and just to be clear at this stage, we haven't looked at them in terms of not budgeting increases, rather in those areas where things can fluctuate quite a bit from year to year that are uncontrollable to us, like a storm account. So, you know, we budget conservatively and think we're gonna have a big storm every year of 300,000, and like this year, you know, knock on wood, it's only September. You know, we don't have a large storm event, so, you know, when we're have a good year, we can put that money away, so when we're in a bad year, we draw from it and don't have to budget at those high amounts every year. So not to, just to be clear, not to say we know we're gonna have this expenditure and we just don't wanna increase the rates. It's really to manage those fluctuations with uncontrollable accounts.
And I kind of get that point. It's just the fact that the word deferral just, gives me a touch of anxiety.
We call them, on our end, we call them reserves.
Yeah. Okay, we'll change the word so it sounds better, but I just would like a little primer on that. I know it's there, but again, you don't want to be holding also money that, there's layers to it then besides the obvious. Okay, so if I could have a motion, I don't think there was any late items brought forward, so, and there's no notice of motions.
So moved.
And, so motion to adjourn, Councillor Woodward, second by Councillor, Page, sorry.
You'll get it one day.
Payne. You, weren't quite fast enough, and all those in favor. Okay, and thank you again for staff to start off the 2024 budget season.
So complicated.
Shouldn't we have sparklers or something?